Ranch lay stretched beneath the open sky, a lonely scar of wood and wire carved into the desert's edge. For years, Caleb Turner had lived there in near silence, speaking more often to the wind and the cattle than to another human being. His days began before sunrise and ended after dark, all shaped by routine, because routine was easier than remembering. His wife's laughter still haunted the walls of the small house, and every creaking floorboard felt like a reminder of a life that had moved on without him. Solitude had hardened him, but it had also kept him alive. That evening, the sun burned low and red, and Caleb noticed something that did not belong: fresh footprints, pressed into the dust near the water well. They were small, light, and barefoot. His hand moved instinctively toward the rifle by the door, not from fear, but from habit. Out here, hesitation could mean death. He followed the tracks slowly, every sense alert, until a quiet voice stopped him. "Don't be afraid." He turned, heart pounding, and saw her standing a few steps away. She seemed to rise out of the land itself, still and watchful. Her long black hair was braided tightly, dust clinging to the hem of her worn clothing. Her eyes held something sharp, but beneath it lay exhaustion, deep, bone-tired loneliness. She said her name was Nia, her voice steady despite the tension in the air, and told him she had been separated from her people days ago. Caleb lowered the rifle. He offered her water first, then food, placing both on the ground before stepping back. Trust, he knew, could not be demanded. It had to be earned. She drank slowly, as if afraid the moment might vanish if she rushed it. The desert wind moved between them, carrying unspoken questions neither dared to ask. As night fell, the ranch seemed different, less hollow. They sat near the porch, separated by a careful distance, listening to the sounds of the dark. Finally, Nia broke the silence. She spoke of walking alone for days, of danger that followed women who had no one to stand beside them. Then she looked at him, her gaze direct, unflinching. "I've gone too long without a man," she said quietly. "Not for desire, but for safety, for strength." The words struck Caleb harder than he expected. He said nothing, only nodded, but something shifted inside him. For the first time in years, the emptiness around him felt disturbed, like the desert itself had sensed that two lonely paths had finally crossed. The days that followed passed more slowly than Caleb expected, as if time itself had decided to linger. Nia remained on the ranch, not as a guest who waited to leave, but as someone learning the rhythm of the land. She rose before dawn, helped carry water, and moved among the cattle with a quiet confidence that surprised him. She spoke little, yet her presence filled the long silences that had once pressed down on him like weight. Caleb found himself listening for her footsteps without realizing it, noticing the way the ranch no longer felt like a place abandoned by the world. One night the wind shifted, carrying the sharp cries of coyotes closer than usual. The sound echoed across the plains, uneasy and hungry. Nia sat by the fire, feeding it small pieces of wood, the flames lighting her face in flickering gold. Caleb watched her from across the fire, aware of the space between them, aware, too, of how fragile that distance felt. "In my tribe," she said at last, her voice low, "we believe loneliness weakens the spirit faster than hunger." She stared into the flames as she spoke, as if seeing memories only she could touch. She told him of her people, of the strength found in shared burdens, and of how being alone had stripped her of that strength day by day. Caleb found himself answering her, though he had not planned to. He spoke of his wife, of how sickness had taken her and left the house filled with echoes. He admitted that the ranch, once a dream they shared, had become a shelter from grief rather than a home. Saying the words aloud felt dangerous, like opening a wound long scarred over. But Nia listened without interruption, her attention steady and sincere. She turned toward him then, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I said what I said because I trust you," she murmured. "I've gone too long without a man who protects without taking, who stands without claiming ownership." Her words carried no demand, only truth shaped by pain. The fire cracked loudly, sending sparks into the night. When Caleb reached for another piece of wood, their hands brushed by accident. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through him, unexpected, unsettling. He pulled back, breath unsteady, aware that the moment had changed, something neither of them could name. That night sleep refused them both. Caleb lay awake, listening to the sounds of the ranch, while Nia stared up at the stars beyond the window. Between them hung an unspoken understanding. Whatever had begun was not born of desire alone, but of two souls recognizing a shared loneliness, and knowing it could never be ignored again. Morning came with a tension that Caleb felt before he saw it. The cattle stirred uneasily, and the horses lifted their heads, ears sharp. Then dust appeared on the horizon, rising in slow, deliberate lines. Riders! Caleb's chest tightened as the figures drew closer, their shapes becoming clear against the pale sky. Apache warriors moved with calm purpose, not rushed, not threatening, but certain. Nia stepped onto the porch beside him, her expression unreadable, though her hands clenched briefly at her sides. She had known this moment would come. When the riders stopped, a man dismounted and spoke her name. Relief crossed his face, followed by concern as his eyes moved to Caleb. Words were exchanged, measured, respectful. They thanked Caleb for giving her shelter, for keeping her alive. But the meaning beneath their voices was clear. Her place was with her people. The desert had rules older than any ranch, and blood ties were not easily broken. Nia listened quietly. Then she stepped forward, lifting her chin. She spoke of the days she had wandered alone, of fear that followed her shadow, of how being found did not always mean being safe. Her voice did not shake. She looked back at the ranch, at the worn boards, the open land, and finally at Caleb. In her eyes, he saw the same question that had been burning inside him since the night by the fire. Caleb moved before he could second-guess himself. He did not reach for her, did not claim her. He only spoke. He told them he would never cage her, never take what was not freely given. But he also said the truth he had, buried for years, that the ranch had been empty long before she arrived, and that her presence had given it breath again. If she stays, he said, voice rough, she won't be alone. The wind seemed to pause. Nia reached up and removed the feather woven into her hair, a sign of trust and choice. She placed it in Caleb's open hand, her fingers warm, steady. I went too long without a man, she said softly, and I learned the difference between possession and protection. Then she turned to her people and told them she had made her decision. There was no anger, only solemn acceptance. The riders mounted again, disappearing into the vast land that had shaped them all. When the dust finally settled, the ranch stood quiet once more, but it was a different kind of quiet. Caleb closed his hand around the feather, and Nia stood beside him, not owned, not rescued, but choosing. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like an empty stretch of desert. It felt like something alive,